case study. She'll be telling us about her own experience dealing with abuse and how she's dealing with it up to now. Then we have Dr. Robinson Ocharo, who is a sociologist. He'll be telling us about whether or not domestic violence has evolved in any way in society, particularly in Kenya. Then we have Rebecca Kitao, who's on my right. She is a psychologist at the Gender Violence Recovery Center at the Nairobi Women's Hospital. She'll be telling us more about the psychological trauma and effect of domestic violence. And then we have Simon Kiguta, whose story we saw a few months ago when we were covering a case where a husband had been injured by his wife. And he is here to tell us more about that story as well. And then we have Peter Gishanka, who is a sociologist who has also helped Simon and dealt with many other men in fighting gender-based violence. Thank you all so much for coming. A little later, we'll try and get you Even Mungoi's story where she spoke to two men and got two different views regarding violence. And perhaps I should start with you, Edna. Edna and Simon will be communicating in a mix of English and Kiswahili for this discussion. Edna, you can tell us more about your story. What is it that happened in your marriage, and when did the cycle of violence start with your husband?
Okay. My marriage, I stayed married for 17 years, but violence ilianza kani nimaliza 3 years kwake ndio akaanza kuchange. Yani ni mtu tu anatoka, mali anatoka tu, mtu anapenzi. Akisa kuja tu hivi, anaweza tu matuzi, ongea vibaya, mimi nachani kunyamaza, ikafika mahali, yani unaona wacha uongee. Sasa nikiongea, ndio hiyo anaanza kubeba weapons like panga, knife, kunyonga. One day, ilikuwa saa 6 ya usiku, kama watoto wamelala.
Watoto walikuwa wamelala?
Watoto walikuwa happy. Na watoto hayo walikuwa wamelala, ndio akaingia. Saa kuingia, akaanza tu venye anaanzanga tu. Sana waanzanga weekends, Saturday jioni, kiamkia Sunday. Sikuangi na amani kabisa. Saa akaanza tu venye anaanzanga tu. Hiyo siku, niliona kitu na moja. But si cross mob, nikaendelea tu kukamwona. Jua alininyoka kabisa. Jua alikuwa amekuja na panga. Baadaye mimi nakuanga na nguvu sahihi anaanza hiyo vita yake. Nakuanga na nguvu zingine Mungu anakupatia. Sasa kukuja na panga, mimi nikashika ile panga. Kushika ile panga, nikailalia kwa kitanda ilikuwa saa 6 ya usiku. Nikailalia kwa kitanda, akaona sasa hataweza kunikata na hiyo panga. Akaachana na hiyo panga, kama nimelalia kwa tumbo, akanishika hapa hivi. Akanishika kabisa, mpaka nikasikia tu. Nikasikia tu acha kubana. Nikaachana na ile panga, nikaanza tu kung'ang'ana, nikamtoa. Akaenda hiyo panga, na mimi nikaapproach hiyo panga. Majina kwamba na mtu sana za vita za kitoka. Kila panga, akanisukuma nje, akaniweka teke moja, nikamrukia kwa ndizi tumepanda hapo nje. Sasa ndio nikakaa hapo nje, yani ndio sasa nipate fahamu. Nikalia, jua anapenda tu mtu tu yani violence, hata sijui venye mtu anawezaishi na yeye.
Lakini sasa mko pamoja.
Niliondoka. Sasa nikifika March 2015, nikifika March 2015, next 10, itakuwa ni 2 years.
Before we also hear from our experts, I think it's also fair that we hear from Simon as well, because I've talked to Alexia.
Sasa mimi nilienda kwa kesi. Hiyo kesi ilitupiliwa mbali. Akasema ati damu ya kwanza ile tulitoa kwa sio na damu ya blanketi ati haikufanana. Sasa ati DNA ilisema ati hiyo damu haikufanana, lakini ya kwanza inaonekana ni ya mwanaume, lakini sio haijulikani
me bring you in here. He's kind of stepped in when he said how he feels he was treated when he was reporting his case. I know you mentioned that he might be uncomfortable here and there. Maybe you can help us bring this to his life. What is it that happened to him? Yeah.
Thank you, Janet. After issuing your some history was speaking, and as you can see, he was cut off because it was all over the media, but it is that by the time I went to court, the case was thrown out because of the DNA and the process of evidence.
They said that he didn't believe him?
Actually, the DNA is the one that told us the confusion between the blood that was on the his blood.
And just like that, they threw it out.
It was thrown out.
Is this something that you see often as a social worker, especially dealing with men who are victims of violence? Do you get the sense that it's kind of set aside more or treated differently than women?
I would not say they're not treated differently. You see, Janet, the issue of a case taken to court. One is that when now I accuse somebody and take him to court, there is a benefit of doubt. Then I have the benefit of the burden of proof. And in case of gender-based violence, especially domestic, it's an issue whereby, unlike us in their case, there was nobody for the two of them. So when you're two in the house, the case is very hard to prosecute. And that's why you're coming with the protection of domestic violence, which is waiting for an unrated employment.
Okay, which we'll talk about a little later. And Peter, you've been on this show before. Many months ago, you were on the show as someone who is reformed. You yourself used to let out violence against your wife. So I'll come back and ask you how that transformation came to be. Before we speak to our experts, let's take a look at Even Mongwe's story. Tonight, in our discussion on domestic violence, Even Mongwe talks to two men. One who killed his wife after a spat, and another who was scolded by his wife after misunderstanding in what is becoming an increasingly familiar phenomenon, that of domestic violence in today's society. Take a look.
7 years ago, John Ngoke Venya returned to his Tharaka-Nithi home to a somewhat distressing scenario. It is the reason why this 46-year-old wears this striped uniform and will, for the rest of his life, refer to the walls of the Naivasha GK prison as home. According to him, though, it was just a second of rage that cost him his wife and his life. He had already forgiven his wife, he says, and had asked that she return home so that they can raise their 3 children. But the family of his wife of 10 years would not accept this arrangement until he settles the remaining dowry, reducing him to waiting by the roadside just so he could get a glimpse of her and talk to her without any interference.
Kwenda kuongeleza yeye walikuwa na mkakati wa babake mtoto. Sasa hapo ndio walianza walikuwa wanatoka huko sokoni. Sasa hapo ndio walianza vita, kaanza kumpiga. Sasa walikuwa wanatoka sokoni kuuza miwa. Huyu ndugu yangu alikuwa na kizu ya kukatia pizo. Sasa vile walishirabu mara mbili, yaani hata siku ile kizu ikaongezea ikampaka
He spends the rest of his life regretting that day, not because he has to pay for it through the death penalty, but because of how it quickly stripped him of his title of husband and father. Was it the alcohol, the pent-up anger? John isn't sure which. At the Nairobi Women's Gender Violence Recovery Center, yet another man's story on domestic violence, only this time. The man is the victim. This father of 3, who has been married for 6 years, has burns in his face, neck, and hands, some of which are too graphic to show. Burns, he says, was sustained after his wife threw hot water his way later that week. Sadly, though, he still is not sure why his wife did it. Stories of domestic violence continue to dominate our airwaves in recent days, with a surge in the number of men also falling victim of such cruelty. Such sentiments usually coming as the too little too late epilogue. Evelyn Ordway, Monday Special.
Thank you for those details, Evelyn Ordway. In just a few moments, we'll also be able to bring up some phone numbers that if you are struggling with domestic violence, if you're a victim, you can reach out to so that you know that you're not alone. But we'll show you those numbers in just a few moments. Before we come to you, Rebecca, Dr. Ocharo, maybe you can give us a sense or clarify, if in your view as a sociologist, this trend, the trend of domestic violence, as crass as that may sound, is evolving. Has it become a lot more violent? We see increased cases of death, it resulting in death. Has it evolved in any way?
Yes, it has. It's about how we construct domestic violence. If you go back to our forefathers, they used to fight homes, using their own sticks and whatever else they made. But over and over, now we're talking about where habits regulate will constitute domestic violence. And I think that we educated also the way to execute or the actual manifestation also evolves. So what other thing that speaking about it openly reporting has become
Yes. What are the reasons, though, behind the increased intolerance? It seems to be a case of intolerance to the point where people act irrational and react violently. What are some of those reasons that we could be seeing this increase in society?
Yeah, you and I would say they are acting irrationally, but this is part of the socialization that takes place. There's what we call modeling. If one of those days I could brag of slapping my wife, these days I'm bragging of killing over the country. So the way we construct also has changed. Now we frankly view their own models, those who look to also socialize with them. Of course, the environment is dynamics to contribute. Traces of the way we last contribute, as we have had these cases, one from the field expanded on these cases of
It does. Rebecca, as a psychologist, I think the main reason, one of the main questions is how prevalent is it in Kenya?
I know it's not clear, but I mean, about the cases that are being recorded in our hospital. And the data about the data that we collected between 2012 to 2013, domestic violence, we had 475 cases. That tells you in every team, either a man or a woman is being abused. And in that statistic, 80% are women who have been abused either by their husband or their partners.
Okay, and are they mostly from Nairobi or from other parts of Kenya?
Mostly are from Nairobi. And however, we still have a number that is not within Nairobi. And I think that I'm reporting the cases that are reported to the women hospital.
How can one tell if they're going to get into some of these potential abuse, whether it's a man or a woman? What are the telltale signs?
Sometimes they are not telltale signs, sometimes they are there. Because people know how to hide. They're very good at masking. So sometimes it's very difficult. But once you're in that, maybe picking it up from Edna, you can tell when you're in that relationship. Because there's a cycle that you can tell. And maybe that is a cycle that would keep Edna for 10 years. by abusing you the first time. And the second time, the person becomes guilty. And not guilty because of the abuse itself. Guilty because of maybe I'll be caught. Maybe she will leave. Maybe. And then after the guilty, the cycle continues because this person abuses normally. And we call that undying phase. And that's where now the person behaves well and trying even to impress the other person. And you think the person has changed. They're having to, it's a cycle. After the normal behavior, that's why when we see the person again setting up and remembering. And in that is where maybe the time is saying now, in that small triggers like alcohol, small triggers like stress in life that we are going through cause that person to snap would trigger me. And then I'll go back to the same cycle.
Let's go back to Edna. Edna, you said that a lot of the times when your husband was violent to you, it would be on the weekend when he was drinking. Before you married him, were there any signs that he was a violent man?
No.
There were no signs? Really? So he was a loving man? So it started to change when you got married 3 years into it. And it went on for how long, you said? 17 years. Why did you stay? What have you done?
Yani, sikutaka kutoka kwangu, sikukuwa ule mtu wangu. Yani nilikutaka na ukitu baba. Yani hiyo ndio marriage yangu ilikuwa ya kwanza na ya mwisho. Sikutaka yani kutoka sababu sikutaka tena kuenda kuona marriage nyingine. Yani niliamua kukaa nimevumilia pati ilisikana mpaka nikatoka. Hata kwa sasa singetoka kwangu. Pati ilibidi nitoke. Juu niliona kifo.
Okay. And Simon, I can also ask you the same thing. Kabla uliona bibi yako, alikuwa mtu mbaya ama mtu mzuri sana? Kitu hivi, tukusikie vizuri.
Hiyo tu ni lazima nijika. Akafikia, lakini hajui. Alikuwa akiniwa tutu. Nilikuwa nimelala, nikampatia hata pesa. Kukula, sasa sijui alifikiria.
Kwa mara ya kwanza?
Ilikuwa mara ya kwanza. Hata kukula, tumeanza kupigania makelele siku hiyo. Unajua mtu, kwa sababu kutembea na watu, wengine wanapatiaga maneno mengine. Lakini ukikaa kimya kwa uwezo utafanya bibi yako hiyo wanaokuwa kufanya bwana lako hiyo.
Hear often?
Yes, it's something that we hear, especially when we are doing counseling. And alikuwa mfu. That's what hiyo ni wazimu. Sometimes it's just something that that is a personality of that person. And that is something that the person has been setting up. But because they have been in that honeymoon phase, and they have been in that normal phase, they just make it a small trigger. And when it's triggered by something, it's now, that is what Akimuta and Anaita was saying. It's a trigger, but that was that person. And something she has been setting up. And so when she was triggered, that's when Anaita went back and wanted to add even so far.
Alright, there's a lot more to ask, but we need to go into our first break. If you have any questions or queries or concerns or anything that you want to ask regarding domestic violence, use the hashtag MondaySpecialPE on Twitter or text us on 22422, leaving your name and location. We'll try and share those views after the break. Stay with us.
With the panel and 2 messages I'd like to respond to together with the panel that is on Twitter. Michael Ofuli says spouses who don't walk away from abusive relationships are as bad as an abuser. And Mohammed Ahmed from Ismail says one of the major causes of domestic violence is poverty.
Interesting point there. I was saying that before we get to that, we were just talking during the break with my panelists, and Wanted to hear from Rebecca to explain the different types of abuse. Maybe you could summarize that for us, and then Peter, you could take us through that cycle that seems to happen. Then perhaps Dr. Ocharo, you can tell us more about the manifestations of it. So as we also wind up and get views from the public. So what are the different types of abuse?
Very different types of abuse. Starting from domestic violence is a term abuse. But under domestic violence, we have the verbal abuse, where there's name calling and all that. From there, we have also isolation, where my partner isolates me from my family, from the society, so that he or she can get power. There is also denial of resources. In some cases, we see even women or men who are working, and they are denied to use that money. So that this person can be using that money. So there is also denial of rights, like, conjugal rights. That's also part of domestic violence, because you are stressing me. So there is a lot, because we all look at physical. Physical now is escalated by what has been happening.
Okay. Peter, as someone who you're now reformed, and we're grateful that you've come on the show as someone who's reformed, in the days when you were abusive, what were your triggers? What was it that could trigger you to be abusive or violent, particularly?
There's an issue of when people get together, there's a point where you come up to even think of abusing your spouse. For me, it was an issue generally, I was socially constructed that women are supposed to be seen, not to be heard. And I had a hard stance on that. Then a certain point was that now the issue, we normally talk about issues of violence starting from verbal abuse. Then from there is the usual slap, the usual blow. And as well as put it, now there's an issue of even having weapons in the bedroom. And what you're talking about is just of the cycle, is that it's a honeymoon time when everything looks okay. Then there's a tension building time whereby now it's like comparison and kind of vulgar language. Then from there there's the actuality. After that now, when the man realizes that, when his spouse realizes that he has abused a particular spouse, they get to a point of now getting back to themselves. And at a certain point, they come with words. They buy a candle, they buy a flower, and at a certain point now things get back to the honeymoon.
And then the cycle continues.
Okay. And that's why you find some people even stay in marriages for a long time. Because things are okay, things will be okay. And most of the people live stay because of children. And those other, you see, there's an issue of get out of a marriage. You're labeled a failure. And in all this, the society now sees you as somebody who was failed in life.
Are you still married to the same person, or so you reconcile? Okay. You're also saying, does it mean that every one of us has this trigger? You actually think yes. It just depends on how we manage it or control it.
Yes. So, because we are products of the same society. And the beauty about the mind that brains never forget what's investigated. Socialization. Now study motive. Ways to explore. He just said it. We know to be valued. That's the master motive. We have grown what we call the maternal society. That's what we master and advancing in the name of women empowerment. It's also another master motive coming out from the other person. So the man will see that.
Yes. And we're starting to see that.
Yes,
okay.
But I would like to clarify something. That trying to be a doctor about this whole aspect of domestic violence and testify to that spouse to spouse, about father to child, mother to child, in-law to in-law. It's in the domestic setting. It's say, fine, open my PFC, I'm weak, I can't take it home. So she prayed that things will work out.
How do we begin to end the cycle of violence? Who does it start with? How do we begin to end? I mean, as we speak, as Rebecca has told us, in Kenya, a lot of the cases it's women, even though we are seeing cases where men become the victims. So how do we begin to end this cycle?
I think first is speaking out. We need to speak out. And I need to be my sisters and my brothers' keeper. And the other thing, other than speaking out, we need to really put emphasis on marital counseling. And the other thing is what Keshava was talking about, the law. Because once I take a brother and hit him, that's criminal. So the law has to come hand in hand and criminalize whatever is happening. And finally, maybe we need to look at the other avenues of our communication. Because if you remember what Keshava was saying, that these things, they build up. We do not stop. So as we build up, we are waiting for a trigger. So we really need to look at avenues of our communication. And then we need to create awareness. And I say maybe we need to start from the schools, where we look at children who look like, maybe that's a discussion for another day, who have the signs, 12 signs. And then from there we can help them to the police. We tell them, we educate them on domestic violence, to the chiefs, to the local leaders, to everyone, to the schools, to the universities where the study is. We have mentors. Somebody talked of role models. Can we have men who are mentoring other men and telling them this is wrong? Can we have women who are mentoring other women and telling them this is wrong? This is how we should negotiate in marriage. This is how parenting should be done. And again, we should need to look at our life stressors. We need to visit maybe counselors, or we need to deal with our work-life balance. And everything that is stressing us. We're living in a very fast world now. So everything is really fast.
We need to manage the stress. We need to manage our stress. That's good advice. Ending the cycle, especially because you're someone who ended that cycle. So maybe you can advise people on how to do that.
Janet, you have taken the team from Lagos. We are the Great Little Village. We have about 20 organizations working towards the same, ending violence against women and girls. And as we heard the day-to-day discussing about issues of what is our entry point, one thing is about empowering themselves, empowering women, and then bringing in men. Currently, we are working on an issue of team-building, where we need to work together as organizations that are working to end this violence. And one thing that has come out very clear is an issue of getting to involve the government, getting to involve the conditions that are based on gender, the gender condition. We have everything right now in Russia. We have the police, we have police officers in Russia right now, give their experience in different areas of gender-based violence. And actually, led by Anton,
So everyone coming together to spread the same message.
We come up with a strategy. Come up with speak with one voice. And the one we are called Africa United to End This Violence.
Okay, the strategy is in the works right now.
Yeah, what we bring is that we have now the Kenyan chapters sitting down in Russia. We take time off because we have to do this. That's why I'm going back there right now. So what we're saying is that if we involve men who are the majority abusers, I used to abuse this. Why should anybody else continue abusing women and girls? And I told you when we have a problem with that, I am now one of three guys in one woman. So it is about the word of gender in my family. Now it's okay. Alright. Actually, the thing here is about the body, the culture, and swelling home.
Okay, before I speak to the other panelists, what was that moment when you decided to stop being an abuser?
There's a time that reality strikes something. You are really socialized that way. I had to respect women. There's an issue of now protecting my three girls, my mother, my sisters, and everybody else. And that's why you're telling me in the moment you're calling them your fathers. And we need to be responsible fathers. And we need to take care of women in our lives. Actually, right now, where we are sitting now, is that more men have come to fight domestic violence because of many other issues and their histories and their stories and their experiences.
Is it going to be an issue? Maybe, okay, first I actually comment before I ask.
I want to what something happened in our society. These days, I can say that the moment there are those days when my life, my plans for you to start home. These days, they go between the good side. That's where you meet your belief, you develop along your differences. Discuss about differences, point out the dream, so much for us is not just
It's a lot of doubt. Okay.
So there's a link to this. I normally say that the license to make the family is given the church. In that certain point, the church is not us, the church is making it. Actually, there's no money to consume. People get into marriage and they turn out, it's like you get into a room that is dark. You don't know where you're headed. There's a post going on in Facebook. It's like we tell our children what's in part. Then it's like for certain areas, some is your child. You don't have a boyfriend. When you get money, it's confusing. So I'm doing points. I don't know where the act is going to that is not. Because now to train the man and tell our
It's okay, yeah, that is. Okay, we have to take a big break. I know I also want to hear from Simon and Edna as we wind up. But before that, let's put up some phone numbers that can help you get some guidance. The Gender Violence Recovery Center number is 0719-638006. That's 0719-638006. That's for anyone really who is suffering right now from domestic violence or who is a victim. And then to report violence against children, the toll-free number is 116, that's 116, or 1195 as well. So please try and remember those numbers. If you know someone who is a victim of domestic violence, these are the numbers that you can use to get some help, get some information, to know that you also have a voice and that you're not alone in this. We'll try and have those numbers again towards the end of the show after we take this short break. Take a short break and come back with the feedback. We'll also invite you saying onto the show and watch the set and then hear the winding comments from our panelists. See this. We're back for the final part of Monday Special. Let's take a look at some of your feedback first, see what some of you have had to say on Twitter. Do we have that ready? Okay, let's see if we can bring that up. Okay, so Angel_Jesus and acknowledging the signs of a peaceful relationship is the first step to ending it. No one should live in fear.
At 1364, it's unfortunate that mutual respect has been substituted by financial supremacy and religious hence such domestic violence.
At NES says there's nothing domestic in domestic violence. This is a barbaric behavior that should be not forgotten.
Mark Krafsos, I think the main pillar of family is respect. If this lacks domestic violence, is it?
Okay, then Maverick Yambo says domestic violence is an act of cowardice and a primitive way to resolve discord. And at Miss Mutuna, a lack of proper communication and understanding between two partners can cause domestic violence. Do we have any others? Okay.
Sean, domestic violence in the society is a depiction of communication breakdown in a marriage institution.
Let's take a look at SMSs as well.
Right, 22422. Somebody says, yeah, I was a victim of domestic violence and actually escaped death by a whisker. My son was only 3 and the situation was traumatizing him. I left. It's been 5 years now. My son has overcome from counseling and much love from my relatives. I advise people, regardless of gender, to please seek another counseling at the first sign of violence. And if it doesn't work, quickly move out. It's either the marriage works or breaks. There are no gray areas. Jerry from Kasari, a spouse who hits you the first time will do so a second time and many more times. This reduces a person's self-esteem and increases self-hate. I walked out after a violent marriage. That was the best decision ever I made. And David Ngure, Nana from Lanata, remember this, their opinion says Hussein, this violence can only be solved if women can respect men and come to know that we can't be equal. I was totally. Okay.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we're completely out of time. I know Rebecca wanted to give a quick comment on how one can get help. If you say that, yeah,
Don't keep quiet at the women's hospital. When it's domestic violence, we treat those cases, they are free. We do not charge them and get treatment and get counseling. And you can join different support groups that are offered at the Women's Hospital Gender Violence Recovery. So speak out, do not. And then violence can't solve any disagreement or conflict.
All right, so unfortunately, that's all the time we have for tonight's discussion. Remember to use the numbers that we put on the screen earlier on. Here the numbers again as we wind up. Let's take a look at those numbers once again. Please jot them down somewhere. And I was corrected and told that 1195 number at the very bottom is only for gender-based violence. For gender-based violence, and 116, the toll-free number is for children. That's violence against children. And another number for gender-based violence is the top one, 0719638006. Please get all the help that you need. I'm Janet Boba. Thank you so much for watching. On a slightly lighter note, happy birthday. It is now 45.
Yeah.
But you look young. You know,
I'm age-based. So she actually just told you how she is. Yeah. I just realized.
I know it's actually really good, but then I got a bit confused. So I'm sorry. I offended you. I didn't get confused.
What do you say?
Happy birthday. Why don't you